Hey. Okay, so again, sorry everyone for the late start, but thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Cassandra. I am the founder at One Piece Therapy as well as one of the psychotherapists at the practice. And today we have one of our psychotherapists, Princess, and she will be presenting on cultural diversity in counseling. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to use the chat and let us know. Or if you're watching the recorded version, please feel free to give us a comment and then let us know if you have any questions in the chat box. So I'll give it over to you, Princess.
Okay. Again, hi everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Princess. So today I will be talking about cultural diversity in counseling and how we can improve ourselves as a therapist or mental health practitioner. Thank you. Okay, so today's topic, we're going to be covering what is culture, why is cultural counseling important, the effect of counseling on immigrants settling in a new area, understanding the differences in culture and its impact on clients, overcoming the effect of cultural stigmatization, prejudice, and discrimination on counseling, coping mechanisms, and resilience in cultural counseling. And we'll also be talking about the characteristics of a culturally competent counselor, the therapeutic relationship and cultural impact, and also improving cultural diversity in counseling. Yeah. So what is culture? Culture is an umbrella term which encompasses the social behaviors, institution, and norms found in human society, as well as the knowledge, beliefs, art, customs, capabilities, and habits of the individuals in this group. So as each person is different, so is our cultural beliefs and values are. So as therapists, we have to be able to really um, understand what it really entails for other persons and their culture, and what one thing means to me as an individual definitely means something different to the other party. So we have to be able to pay attention to that. Can you move, Cassandra? Thank you. Okay, so what is counseling? Counseling is an act of support between a mental therapist practitioners and its clients who has physical, emotional, and mental health issues by helping them to resolve the crisis, reduce feelings and distress while improving the sense of well-being in general to achieve their desired goals. So again, why is cultural counseling important? Cultural counseling is a vital piece for art therapists and clients because that enables us practice better, again, to have an idea about the present culture and to identify some of the issues our clients may struggle with by making the client feel more supported, comfortable, and confident in our space before establishing the treatment. Our approach through counseling is also to be able to surround the word while encouraging us, the practitioners, to be non-biased and well-rounded in our approach to meet the needs of our clients who happens to come from different part of the world. So we have to be sensitive in a unique way. Despite the difficult situation, we have to make sure that our clients are comfortable and are willing to really enable or see how their world looks like. And so with this, a professional counselor or a mental health professional may consider using some of the following cultural therapy techniques while working with culturally diverse clientele. So one of these is the therapeutic approach, which is a key skills for all therapists, and to have the ability to connect with one another on a human level. The most important part of personal skills are conventional skills, which is, listening, responding, asking thoughtful questions. Counselors and therapists must be curious, so must really be curious and be attentive to our clients' needs, inquiring about their backgrounds, their fears, feelings, emotions in a respectful manner without being judgmental. The other piece is the communication piece. So with that, I can also talk about the empathy, which without empathy, we cannot have we cannot have um, a platform to have a better treatment for our client. So empathy simply means sharing feelings, and not by feeling sorry for the client per se, it's just by really going through their world with their lenses and seeing how it looks for them in order for us to have an idea about how and ways we can begin establishing our treatment. So I would also talk about the cultural piece, which is the values when it comes to culture. So the values are the values of the client, how they see their world, what's it in their world, how their culture plays a role when it comes to mental health, and how they are able to receive this form of support and help. And the next one will be the self awareness piece. The self awareness piece is basically understanding our skills and how it's important by implementing ways that we can use to carry out a proper treatment through this platform. So we have to understand our client on a deep level, not only by being sensitive, but also recognizing why the issue is necessary and how and ways we can build our client's therapeutic relationship with them. We also have to be flexible. And in this flexibility part, I'll give an example or share a recommendation. So, for example, you have someone from a different cultural background who their ways of nurturing kids is different from the Western world, where they would smack kids and it's normal for them. And in their culture is acceptable, is something they'd experience all throughout their lifetime. For having to come to the Western world or this part of the world, it can be quite overwhelming for this client, where it becomes a tug of war between themselves and the kids and the culture. And that's huge because if you don't have a good knowledge or a vast knowledge about that, you may likely want to involve the social services because you deem it as child abuse. But if you have the cultural knowledge, you would really have a wild understanding about how those people do things and why they are this way. So, as a therapist, it's our duty to really educate them what works in our culture, how we see these things before labeling all of these things as a form of abuse. So, give them an opportunity to understand the word without judging them, while they're also trying to find ways to fit into the system, if that makes sense. Yeah. So we have to really be kind and patient with this set of people.
I just want to jump in here, Princess, because I think it's also important, even on the client's end, to as much as there is value in absolutely finding a therapist that has a similar, if not the same, cultural value as you, but also if they happen to be of a different culture, it's so important that as a client, when you are looking for a therapist, that they do have these values here, these approaches of, the communication, the self-awareness, because it is so important to feel understood more than just the concerns being presented on, right? To really support and feel supported, a therapist does have to know all of you as much as possible, right? So I did just want to just chime in here, because as much as it's on the therapist to present and be informed about these, it's also good for our client to know to look for this in a therapist that is not of the same culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So the effect of counseling on migrants settling in a new area. This can be quite challenging for this new set of people who has changed their wards to come into a different ward. So immigrants are usually on the sharp edge of the sword, especially when they have come from a different cultural background and are trying to fit in into a new culture and environment. For this reason, immigrants easily fall into depression whilst gradually trying to fit into the new system. Immigrants who have migrated or escaped from an abusive relationship, environment, or habitats even find it harder to loosen up and connect with individuals around the new environment. For example, the Ukrainians. And talking about the Ukrainians, I did experience a one-on-one with them. I'm not from Ukraine, but because I was able to really apply my vast knowledge of diversity and experiences that I have had around the world, I I was able to pay attention to this particular client who has been having abusive relationship, she said, for the past 11 years. But in their culture, it was normal where their partner can, abuse them physically and they didn't have the right to complain whatsoever. So coming to the Western world, she felt that kind of guilt by not wanting to complain. But as a therapist, I could, or I was able to build a relationship with her to let her understand that this is not normal. Like, this is not what love really entails, and whatever and however they've gotten here, what's her plan, what's her future in order to, have a better relationship with, her partner, and how can they accept the Western world. So again, like I said, these are things that they don't have an idea about. Their word is their word. That's all they know, until we are able to really guide them to see how it should be, or how they can adjust to a certain level without forcing them out of their relationship or without judging them. Um, do you have anything to say on that part, Cassandra?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point that I'm curious to ask you the question. How do you know, at what point do you challenge someone's culture, right? Because as much as, if they're like, I know in therapy too, if someone is okay with something, then I don't deal with it. I'm like, okay, if you're okay, I'm okay, right? If you're bothered by it, then I'm bothered by it. Of course, there's times when it comes to abuse where it's like, okay, there's something wrong with being abused, right? But outside of that, I'm curious with how do you know when it's okay to challenge someone's cultural belief?
Again, it all depends on the relationship you have with this person, because majority of the times they come in so confused, right? They know it's not right, right? But at the same time, their culture permits it, and they have this guilt, and the guilt is really, this person brought me to this part of the world for us to have a better life. How can I betray this person? So you have to work it up to a certain level where they are comfortable. And if they are not comfortable, there's really nothing much you can do but to hope that they get to a certain place where they can maybe speak up for themselves or have more experiences with the culture to start accepting what is normal and what's not in their terms.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That is so interesting. That is actually so interesting. But there is absolutely value to, and okay, now you're in a different culture.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So let's adjust to the present. Let's integrate. Not necessarily assimilate, but let's integrate.
Yeah.
We're no longer in Ukraine, so you don't have to do that, right? And again, of course, um, being Caribbean descent, African descent, there's part of your culture that you bring no matter where you go, right? That it's just part of you and who you are. But absolutely, in that specific example, when it comes to abuse, that's not normal. It shouldn't be normal in any culture, unfortunately. It does happen, but yeah, yeah, I agree with you.
Okay. So here are the most significant issues which immigrants face today, and how do we tackle all of these issues as therapists? So number one is the language barrier. So a lot of our clients can come in who don't speak English. How do we handle those people? It could be hard. Sometimes they'll try to speak, and as therapists, we have to be patient to try to make sense of what they're saying without being in a haste to close the door or just tell them I cannot support you. And better still, if you can speak their language, that's a huge advantage. But majority of the times we're not able to do that. But how can we be patient to support this client while walking them through the language barrier, and also encouraging them to speak English and learn how to speak in the culture that they just found themselves, right? So they also experience lack of employment opportunities, and that also comes from the fact that they don't have experiences. They don't have a lot of things that our culture offers. Then there is the language barriers. So it's just a lot you're dealing with, which easily throws them into this depressive state, right? But again, as much as we are willing to also support this client, they also have to be able to have the energy to keep pushing and striving to be better in order to meet at a certain point. They also have the housing issues. Of course, if you have the employment issues, the language barrier, then it means they don't have money to afford the basic needs, that we all have. Access to medical services sometimes could be challenging depending on the state they live in or the country. For example, in the United States, if you don't have health services, you cannot do nothing. You cannot go through their mental health and their health system, right? Let alone their mental health system. So those are the things we have to consider and look for ways and resources as therapists to help them and see how we can just be of a support system, and how they can also try to support themselves while trying to figure out all of these things. So resources in this part is really, really important. And transportation issues, same as the housing issues. The cultural differences, a lot of those clients struggle, they really struggle with the culture. Most times they'll come and say they don't understand or they don't understand the English accent, and also they're not being understood. So it's a huge one for them, and we have to keep encouraging them and supporting them while they go through this phase. Then the raising kids part, that was the part I just touched on earlier on. It's so different from them. I believe this is the most significant part they deal with. Just learning to raise their kids in this Western world compared to where they're coming from, where they're like the way they're like everything to these kids. You know, you tell them what to do, they do it without argument. Then somehow these kids comes to the Western world and it's a different ballgame, entirely, which is really difficult for the parents, right, to adjust. And if we're not able to do that, majority of them actually end up, deciding to leave or separate from their marriages because they see that as a problem, or they try to make that the problem of the issues when really that's not the case, right? So then the prejudice. So it's just a lot on this part that we as therapists has to, pay attention to and really see how we can support these people who are going through this difficult time. Understanding the difference in culture and its impact on client. So by being culturally aware, we can recognize and have appreciation for all the values, the customs, the beliefs, and meet them without judging or prejudice. We are culturally aware, we can know what is considered inappropriate or offensive to others. Incorrect body language can often lead to misunderstanding. So if you don't understand what your client is saying, you want to ask questions, open-ended question. What do you mean by this? How does this feel for you? So when you have, or when you put in those body languages, it could be a turn off for them. It could be they're also feeling rejected by you. So you really want to pay attention to those tiny details in order to have a better relationship with this client and be able to support this client um, through their issues. Also, the cultural awareness amongst the therapist and client promotes effective communication, and hence it becomes easier for therapists to stay connected and serve global clients effectively. So again, this is just you really asking questions, communicating, clear communication, understanding what you're trying to say, you know, being patient, applying the empathy piece, because this will enable them feel understood and heard. And when they feel that certain of level of comfort, they are able to really express themselves, and you're able to take them to that part or that treatment way. So by understanding different culture and belief, a therapist creates a diverse and inclusive culture. So it is a really important piece for us as practitioners to know what we're doing when it comes to those clients and how they can and how we can support them. Okay, please next slide.
Absolutely, Princess. I mean, I can relate to that pretty well. I remember first time I actually broke the ice and decided to see a therapist. And just from my background, I'm originally African, Nigerian to be precise. And I think with her body language at the time and how she reacted to some of the things that I said, I quickly realized I might be getting into trouble. So I never went back for a second session. And that's how I met you, because I particularly looked for a black, actually African, someone from an African descent who would actually understand my struggles and where I was coming from. And that's why I signed up with you. So I can definitely relate to the fact that, cultural differences plays a big role in having a client feel comfortable whilst having a chat or building a relationship with a therapist.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that.
Well,
Thank
no
you.
problem.
Yes, it is truly, again, there is such significance in not only feeling understood and supported by your therapist, but also a therapist knowing that you do need to culturally understand someone to support them better, right? Because I mean, for with your example of body language, Princess, there's I know sometimes religion can be intertwined into culture, but there are some cultures that making eye contact with the opposite sex is sometimes it's seen as disrespectful, right? Whereas in therapy, we 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 look into those things, right? If a client is not making eye contact with us, we wonder what is going on. Is something wrong? Is this a reflection of their self-esteem or something else? But to know that certain body languages can be a sign of respect, right? Than it being a sign of, an internal problem, right? It's so important for the client to, again, feel supported in knowing, okay, this is how I do things, but I don't need to do that here if I don't want to, right? Or if it's not beneficial for me to continue to do this behavior. Um, but again, I think it does go back to your point of asking questions, right? Just asking questions, but like if a body cue is being hard to read, then ask, what does this mean? Right. But I think even for clients, it's important if a therapist is not of the same cultural background to let them know, okay, this is important to me because of, XYZ. Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And also, like you said, I think it's more like the true questions, like what does this mean for you? I know as therapists, we're not supposed to accept gifts from clients, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes rejecting this client gift means you're rejecting them because for them in their culture, gift means something entirely different.
Right.
It's not like you're trying to create a dual relationship. It's just more of the therapeutic relationship, right? They feel this is something that it's in their culture and that they have to do. So as therapists, we have to be able to really differentiate what one culture means for one client to the next and why, right? Before maybe rejecting or considering accepting whatever it is, that you've been given.
Absolutely. Yes. To not be offended
Yeah.
by it, right? Because
Mm.
yes, I know ethically they say we can't accept gifts.
Yeah.
It can blur the lines of the relationship, but as you're saying, understanding that it's a sign of respect in some cultures to give a gift and not, oh, my client's interested in me in a different way, like it, again, being culturally informed, it really does help both ends of
Yeah.
the relationship.
Absolutely, because sometimes they have like the first festival, something, and they think about you as a therapist, and they bring maybe their little candies, just as a form of gift. So in that space, turning them down, it's like you're rejecting them, and most times it has a very negative impact on the relationship, on the therapist clientele relationship, and with the best knowledge that I've had today, they don't end up going back to that same therapist.
Right.
Yeah, because they just feel rejected.
Yeah.
Or mainly it's just due to the lack of communication between both parties.
Mm. Mm. Interesting.
Yeah. Overcoming the effects of stigmatization, prejudice, and discrimination on counseling. So stigma often comes from lack of understanding or fear, but majority of the times is lack of understanding, right? Inaccurate or misleading media representation of mental health contribute to both factors. And this is really huge, this stigmatization. Like they go through this a lot. So mental health is something that they don't believe is real. They feel is more like the Western world illness. So it's hard for them to really express themselves. There was a story that I heard at the point where a lady who just gave birth, so postnatal depression was happening, and she communicated that piece to her husband, and he made a huge deal out of it because he felt like the wife was trying to, you know, to accept the Western culture when really is not a cultural piece. So he saw it as a cultural thing instead of a mental illness issues, right? So, at the end of the day, as therapists, we have to be able to educate these couples and let them see how important it is that mental health is real and postnatal depression could be a thing, right? And support them to explore the best route they can have while going through this. So it takes a lot. It takes a lot from us as a therapist to really break this word and make it acceptable to these people. Yeah, so that's one. So stigma around mental health, especially in issues for some diverse racial ethnic communities, it can be a major barrier to people with those cultural accessing mental health services. For example, in some Asian culture, seeking professional help for mental illness may be countered to cultural values of strong families, emotional restraint, and avoiding shame. So, among some groups, including the African American communities, distrust of the mental health system can be a barrier for seeking help. So they don't trust the system, like in America, for example, blacks Black Americans will usually challenge the system and feel they're just being labeled, or they're just wanting to diagnose them of something that they don't have. So it really takes us, the practitioners, to be able to explain. And this is why I would say the cultural piece is quite important. Majority of the times, blacks wants to work with black therapies. They just like to have their own people because somehow they feel they'll be more understood, and vice versa. But as a therapist, even if you find yourself in a setting like that where you're not from their origin, or you're not from their country or their culture, you're still able to hold that space by communicating, listening, and just respecting their views before establishing the treatment plan.
Yes, I agree. I definitely agree with this because, again, as I mentioned, I'm Caribbean descent, but I have clients that are African descent, right, and in different parts of Africa. And although I'm familiar with a little bit, the reality is I wasn't raised in it, right? So at least initially, there were certain things I would have to clarify and to understand about the client. But it's also good. I find even my clients that are Caribbean descent, I still ask them, how do you experience our culture, right? Because although it's the same culture that we were raised in, people can also experience the same culture differently. So I find it's even good, even when we are from the same culture, for me to get to know their experience with it, right? Because essentially therapy is about their experience. So as much as I can say, okay, I understand, or you let me know how you're understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we also have different types of stigma when it comes to the culture. So there's the public stigma, where it involves the negative or discriminatory attitudes that others have about mental illness. And then there's the self stigma, which refers to the negative attitude, including internalized shame that people with mental illness have about their own condition. So this is not personal. This is them judging themselves, so self judgmentals, and maybe not wanting to seek for help due to the fear of the stigmas. Then there's also like the institutional stigma, which is more systemic, involving policies of government and private organizations that intentionally or unintentionally limit opportunities for people with mental illness. Example include lowering funds for mental illness research or fewer mental illness services relative to other health care. And this can be a turn off for those clients because they feel if they have to go seek for help, then certain things are just not going to go right with their personal lives, or there will be that stigma when it comes to their workplace. And so it's really a huge one for them where they begin to contemplate if it's worth seeking for this help or not. The next slide, Cassandra. Thank you. So we'll be talking about the harmful effect of stigma and discrimination. So stigma and discrimination can contribute to worsening of symptoms, obviously, and reduce likelihood of getting treatment. Effect can include reduced hope, again, due to the stigma and fear of acceptance, lowers their self-esteem. So when they're already battling with this mental health illness, then with the stigma, it's just like a little bomb that, nobody wants to deal with. So it's really a huge place they don't want to go. So as practitioners or as mental health practitioners, we have to be able to, guide them and encourage them and let them feel seen and heard, so they know that, okay, they are not alone. You're with them. You understand their situation, right? And try to build in that self-esteem or self-worth. There's also the increased psychiatric symptoms. There's the difficulties with social relationship due to the stigmas. Then there's reduced likelihood of staying with treatments. So they can start, most times they don't continue, they stop. So as therapists, we want to try to check in with our clients, see how they are doing, why they stopped, encourage them for maybe one extra meeting. And again, try to see how you can encourage and support them with open-ended questions that may lead to something else that you're not aware of, right? So then there's more difficulties at work, which obviously is always the case, right? Like shutting down and not wanting to deal with all of this. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to highlight one of the attendees that mentioned his experience in therapy. Feeling possibly, stigmatized or discriminated against, it could have reduced your hope, right? As you mentioned, from continuing therapy. So I definitely just want to acknowledge that strength. This therapist is not for me, and not therapy is not for me. Because even that is so important to differentiate, because especially our first experience, it can really be discouraging. I'm not opening up again. I'm not going to be vulnerable again. But understanding yourself and understanding the need to talk and understanding therapy is for you, just finding the right therapist is the next step.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to highlight that person.
Yeah, and even like when it also comes to like relationship, right? So relationship also, culture also plays a huge role in relationships, right? How they see each other and everything. So a client actually came in and talked about the experiences they had with another therapist due to the challenges they were having in their relationship. And the first encouragement they got was to separate, right? Because they felt that was the only way to figure it out without considering their cultural background, how marriage looks like for them. And so it really got them scared. And they just kind of like locked in themselves and felt like, okay, if we have to go seek for help, it means we have to destroy this relationship. So they had to choose.
Mm.
So it was a hard place for them. So that's why really understanding these people's culture and how their world looks like by trying to see their world through their lenses. So we have to basically have different lenses that fit each client and how they respond to all of these values in their personal lives.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's another great example of just transferring these skills outside of a therapy world of, interacting with others. It is also important to understand someone else's culture. Dating outside of your culture, it's important to understand someone's culture. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Ways to overcome mental health stigma is by educating those clients about mental health, such as sharing on social medias, having webinars and just explaining and teaching people how these things can affect this set of peoples and how each person's world is different. So we also have to educate ourselves and others, respond to misceptions of negative comment by sharing facts and experiences, and also the sources that each cases has brought to you or you've heard about to, keep encouraging these people. Be cautious about language. Remind people that words matters, gestures matters. So your body movement, your language, eye rolling, everything, can have a huge impact on these people's mental health. So encourage equity between physical and mental illness. Show compassion. I believe compassion is the key foundation for therapists. Without compassion, there's no treatment. Compassion is the only way we can really have an idea about our client's world, how they feel. It may not make sense to you, but trying to see it from their world will begin to make you have an idea about why and how they feel a certain way. So be honest about treatment, normalize mental health treatment just as every other healthcare treatment. Let the media again know that using stigmatization language representing stories of mental illness in a stigmatizing way could be very detrimental to these people's health and well-being. So choose empowerment over shame, right? So again, that is the encouraging part, empowerment part, right? To let them know that they are not alone. We all go through it. Even as therapists, we all have our own fair shares. So this is part of the world, and this is why we're humans. So again, it's just the empathy, peace, and kindness and support for these people to be heard and seen.
Yes, and then one more thing I wanted to add is also a way to overcome mental health stigma is choose the right therapist for you. Right? It is that is your empowerment. You can decide who you want to work with. You can decide who you want to share your world with. Right. So it's so important to know that who you start with doesn't have to be who you continue with.
Mm-hmm. And most importantly, is to know that a therapy relationship is also like you having your normal relationship. You would have to try different ones to finally find the suitable one. So
Yeah.
what parents shouldn't discourage you from ever, seeking for mental health and support because that was just one experience. So, learn to forgive and know that that was just the level of their knowledge. But at the same time, keep searching until you find somebody who can relate with you or who you're comfortable sharing your stories with. So do not give up. So this is still like rephrasing everything, talk mental and talk openly, educate everybody about, the misception and negative comments and sharings and experiences on social media platform and the world we live in today. So the ways we can also overcome cultural stigma surrounding counseling is to recognize that you're not crazy. Because most times your culture can make you feel crazy and label you all sort of things. But being able to challenge those thoughts, seek for external help to see if you're crazy. And if not, get that support and help that you're really looking to get. Um, See the wisdom in asking for help. Again, realize that you're not alone and start with yourself. So as long as you know there's something not okay, do not stop searching until you find that peace of mind and support that you're actually looking for. Mm. Again, this is just wrapping up everything. Language is always a barrier when it comes to cultural counseling process. So differences in counseling can lead to miscommunication, misdiagnosis, and misinterpretations. That's why questions in questions, you rather ask too much questions than not ask enough, just so you can have the picture and better knowledge about your clients' um, difficulties or challenges. So a lack of communication can really be an hindrance to the treatment process. So if you cannot really make sense of what your client is saying, then there's no point continuing that treatment. Look for a therapist or guide them towards a therapist who can understand them and who understands their language. Or maybe if they have an interpreter, they can bring in the interpreter to support. I'm currently dealing with one right now who don't speak English. Well, the partner speaks English, so we are able to communicate better. But patient, you always have to apply that patient. Don't be in a hurry to cover a lot of topics. Little steps helps. So whatever you can achieve in the process is very well encouraged. So the barriers and counselors may face are languages, values, class bonds, and cultural bond values in trying to relate to the client. So you have to pay attention to those details for yourself. If you're not competent, then you're not competent. Refer and support them. Some strategies that may help include help the client to feel more welcome, know the client's relationship, so take time to build your relationship, right? Never judge, so always create a non-judgmental space. Be mindful of your body movement and languages. Ask more questions again, and manage your own emotions. Things might feel like doesn't make sense, may not make sense to you, but remember, this is this client's problem. So try not to project your problems. It's quite important for you both to have a non-judgmental space. So again, always pick up that lenses and try to view their world from their world and let it make sense, or try to make it make sense to you. Ask more questions. Don't make a client feel rejected. Explain and use your words, show that care and empathy. Refer the client to a different therapist again if you know, okay, you're not competent or it's not something you can do. Yeah.
Okay, I think,
And-
yeah, I think that is the end.
Mhm.
Any summarizing points that you wanted to share, Princess?
The summary of this topic is really to be kind. As therapists, that's what we have to wear all the time. Pay attention to details and know that as much as we are all humans, but we all have our beliefs and values that are so different from the rest of the world. So always wear your curious heart to get to know people and have an idea about their world. And that just really enables you to have more experiences while gathering better tools and resources to keep supporting these people.
Absolutely. Yes, yes. I think something I've really taken away from your webinar is therapists needing to have the willingness to learn, right? And as much as we can about different approaches, different the latest research on treatment, we also need the willingness to learn about cultures, right? Especially from a client's perspective. And the only way you would get that understanding is by asking the client directly, right? So the willingness to continuously learn inside of sessions and outside of sessions is so crucial to build a relationship and then have that supportive dynamic. I really thank you for presenting on this topic. If you all have any questions or comments, please feel free to use the chat. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for engaging with us, and the ones watching the recorded version, thank you so much for watching.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Problem. Thank you for showing up and engaging with us.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, I'm gonna have a great day, everyone, and please join us for our next webinar as well.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.